Well, hello and welcome to this RSAA webinar. My name is Bill Hayton. I'm the editor of Asian Affairs, which is the journal of the Society, and I'm hosting today. And I'm very pleased to welcome Syeda Zakia Ahsan, the youngest daughter of the man we're going to be talking about, Syed Badrudduja. Zakia is an educationalist, has been a trustee of the Asian University for Women in Chittagong, and is going to talk to us today about the life and legacy of her father. So shall I hand over straight to you, to Zakia? Would you like to introduce the subject and tell us all about his life and times?
Good afternoon. It brings me, gives me, makes me feel very happy to have you all give your time to listen to my father's story. I am the youngest of 11 siblings, and when he passed away, I had just joined college, Loreto College in Calcutta. It was the 18th of November, quite a cold day, not as cold as it is in London. And he passed away at night at around 10:35 p.m. I can vaguely remember that the forecourt and the surrounding of the house was flooded with people from our community as soon as the news reached them. He was buried the next day, late afternoon, and the graveyard was several miles away from where we lived. It usually takes about 20 minutes to reach that place, but it took us 2 hours plus to reach the place because of the number of people who joined the funeral procession. People came from all walks of life, and as we progressed with the coffin, uh, people from all occupations, religions, they got down from trams and taxis and buses to join the funeral and say a prayer. It was quite congested, and every person in the procession wanted to get hold of his coffin to say a prayer for him. And in fact, there was a rush which had to be controlled. When we reached the graveyard, it was past 9 p.m. at night, and it was filled with lanterns and black flags from the Muslim community, bereaving at his death. And that was it. He was gone. A part of ourselves was gone. We were diminished. We came home sad and somber. But I will tell you of the nice times I had of him, of the goodness I saw in my father, of the innocence he portrayed to children. As a young child, I used to get up very early, so I always associate him with dawn. When he got up for his morning prayers at dawn, a little later I would get up. I was an early riser, and all I can remember is him reading his rosary in his study. As I tried to get his attention, he would sometimes come to me and say, "Do you want something to eat?" And soon there would be something coming to me because he would inform the helpers to give me some food. I always considered him a role model, a man of compassion, love, affection, very soft spoken, very unassuming, always smiling. I have never heard him shout at anyone as long as I have seen him. I have not seen much of him because I'm the youngest of all, and he passed away in 1974, and I was in my first year college. However, I will celebrate today his principles, his integrity, his honesty, and the life he led for all of us and for all the community and Muslims in India. He was born in an aristocratic family in a village called Talipur in Murshidabad, not too far away from Calcutta. He was the he was one of the four brothers that he had, and he had a sister. He did his schooling in the village in Talipur and then moved on to Calcutta, where he uh, studied at the prestigious Presidency College. He did an honors in philosophy and and then a master's in English literature. After that, he did a law degree. He was quite interested in practicing law, but then after he participated, or he carried out one case for Rani Rashmani, who was part of the royalty of Bengal, and he won the case for her, he stopped. And the underlying reason for that was that when you entered the arena for the case, you had to bow down and say, "My lord," to the judge. And he thought that was against our faith, because we as Muslims only bow down to Almighty Allah. So that was the end of his legal career. He was very lucky to come in touch with Chittaranjan Das, who was an eminent political leader and wanted freedom for India on constitutional and peaceful means. Chittaranjan Das noticed my father's ability, his inherent quality to join politics, and always encouraged him to get into this field. And it was when he got his first job in Calcutta Corporation. So therefore, Chittaranjan Das was one of his mentors, looked up to him, and expected him to do a lot in the coming years. How unfortunately, Chittaranjan Das passed away in 1925, and my father was very heartbroken because he looked up to him as his leader and his mentor and his guide. Soon he came in touch with Subhash Chandra Bose, who was also from a very aristocratic family, and he fought for freedom in India, and he later became the president of the Congress. He left India and went to Germany and then to Japan. And much later, from Singapore, he formed the Indian National Army to offer resistance to British rule. My father was quite close to him, although he belonged to another faith, Hinduism, and my father to Islam. Badrudduja and Chittaranjan Bose would in time take different paths in politics, but a common factor which united them was the sense of urgency they brought into their struggle for national freedom. The two men came from two different religions, Badrudduja a Muslim and Bose a Hindu. As yet, the flames of religious communalism had not come in the way of the united struggle for freedom. And both Badrudduja and Bose, as disciples of Deshbandhu was the name given to Chittaranjan Das. Deshbandhu means friend of the nation. So they both became friends of Deshbandhu Chittaranjan Das, who upheld the need for a secular polity to take charge of India once the colonial power made its way out of the country. Now, in 1930, my father was selected as a member of the Bengal Legislative Assembly. He was at this time a member of the All India Muslim League, not because he believed in partition, not because he did not want communal harmony, but because it was a platform he thought that would give him a chance to speak about the needs and the aspirations of the Muslim community in India. Very soon he felt that the division of India was imminent. He could feel the air and the surge of the two-nation theory in the environment. He was opposed to that. He wanted a united India, a free India, a just India, an India which would flourish with communal harmony. So as a result, in 1940, he left the Muslim League, whereas many other Muslims remained in India. He did not go to Pakistan when the country was divided, because he thought the Muslims were left in a very vulnerable and fairly unsafe condition at that point in time. And he wanted someone to speak for them, and so he stayed there. He was offered very high posts in the Pakistan cabinet if he had gone there, but he refused. And he stayed on in India, plodding his life, speaking about the needs of the Muslims and other minorities. Gradually, as he advanced in his life, in 1943, he became the mayor of Calcutta. You must remember that the mayor of Calcutta, when he became the mayor of Calcutta, it was a very fraught time. It was a time of famine when 3 million people died in Bengal. And he took upon himself the responsibility of trying to see that every citizen, as a right, at least got food and shelter. And in his capacity, he took the privilege of writing to several British administrators and politicians at that time. Now, if we think of the riots after 1947, it deepened his belief that the time had arrived for a parting of ways between the religious communities. For a time, he believed that his Bengal, as a sovereign republic, free of the partition of India, would survive as a single entity. That did not happen, and the province was split into regions of India and Pakistan. It was at this point that his leadership of the Muslim community was seen on a larger scale, and it assumed significance. He continued to serve in a newly free India as a leading voice of the people in West Bengal Legislative Assembly, at a time when leading Muslim politicians in India were exercising their options of going over to Pakistan, both in the East and in the West. Badrudduja hardly needed any convincing that his presence was required in Bengal in post-1947. We now go on to his entry into formal politics. He lost an election in 1953 to the Bengal Legislative Assembly, but he was re-elected in 1957 with a huge majority of votes, a huge number of votes. And as he was very well known for his speeches in the Bengal Legislative Assembly, which he adorned with immaculate English and his sense of humor and wit. And what happened was, in 1962, he advanced even further. So now he was an independent candidate. He was not in the Muslim League. Forever, from a long time, he remained an independent candidate in all elections. He moved on to the Lok Sabha because he was elected in 1962 as a member of parliament, and again in 1967 as a member of parliament. However, he was imprisoned in 1964, although he was a lawmaker. He was imprisoned several times for sedition against the state. He was first placed under detention for 36 hours in 1950 under the Preventive Detention Act. In 1953, he was in incarceration in Calcutta's Dum jail for a month under the Preventive Detention Act. In 1964, he was imprisoned for 3 weeks under the Defense of India rules, although he was a lawmaker in this case. In 1964, he spent 6 months in prison under the Defense of India rules. In 1971, he was taken under detention, which stretched to 2 years under the Defense of India rules, owing to the fact that once released on bail, he was rearrested more than once at the prison gate on new charges. However, we were delighted when he was released from prison in 1973, but placed under detention at home on the proviso that he would need to report periodically to the local police station about his presence at his residence and non-movement beyond home. His last spell of incarceration between 1971 and 73 was on a charge of sedition, which the Indian government at that time was unable to substantiate, just like in previous imprisonment terms. The withdrawal of the case was announced at a public rally by the West Bengal Chief Minister Syeda Zakia Ahsan in 1972. However, when he came home, to remain as house arrested. He came home very frail in a stretcher. We were very diminished, sad, because we have never seen our father sick. We have always seen him walking about, busy with his work, meeting people, and leading a very healthy and normal life. And from then, he retired from politics because he was mentally and physically weakened by this long term of imprisonment. And he retired from formal politics. I just want to mention what happened when they came to imprison him, a small episode. So, from time to time, people came to imprison him, and I have seen him after 1955 because I was born in 1955. So, during these episodes, people came from the intelligence department to take him to prison. For us, it was a normal happening. Nobody was desperate, nobody cried, nobody moaned, because we knew he was fighting for a just cause and he will be back soon. So when they came, we just packed his bags and sent him off. Once during the emergency, when I was in school, a whole lot of people from the intelligence department came to search our home for facts that would prove sedition. They went through my father's entire library, which was huge, with books on literature, politics, philosophy, religion, and fiction. And I was just in school, and I had pen friends in different countries. They even wanted to go to my study and take out my pen friends' letters and read them, which embarrassed me. And in the end, they wanted to go and have a check in my mother's bedroom. My mother was a very brave lady. She did not allow it. And her request was respected graciously. And we are so fortunate they didn't enter her bedroom, and they said it's fine. So this was the kind of image I have of my mother and my father. And I am grateful for what my father has portrayed in his lifetime and the values and ethics he has imbibed in us. He has not given us wealth materially, but he has given us spiritual wealth, moral wealth, with which we have moved forward. Out of 11 siblings, I have one dear brother alive who is in America, who is watching me now, and I am the youngest of all siblings. Badrudduja's brilliance as a politician was demonstrated throughout his career by his ability to draw people to him with the power of words. His admirers, particularly those who heard him speak at public rallies, often referred to him as the Edmund Burke of India. He electrified the crowds in any of the 4 languages, Bengali, Urdu, Persian, English, in which he addressed them. It was a trait he began to demonstrate early on, and one that would impress those who heard him on the many occasions when he spoke. His oratory would draw crowds of all religions and linguistic persuasions to him all the way to the end of his life. He addressed literary gatherings in Urdu and Persian at such august places, the All India Indian Muslim University in 1953 in Aligarh. His English, immaculate in its employment of terms and phrases, was a means of intellectual education for those who had the good fortune of coming in contact with him. And of course, his Bengali speeches, interspersed as they were with reference to poetry, religion, invocations, and details of history, marked him out as one of the handful of political figures unmatched in their ability to convince people of the causes they had held dear. His oratorial skills were praised in the Bengal Legislative Assembly. His articulation of the issues earned him the appreciation of his fellow legislators. 50 years on, when I visited India after the COVID experience we all had, I met a professor who has written a biography on him in Urdu. And I was so pleased that he could do what we could not. We plan to translate that into English. This is part of his career, this is part of his life, but as a human being, he also had very good likes. He was fond of animals. He was fond of nature, which led him to name two of his grandchildren with the name of birds, Bulbul and Munia. He was fond of music. He was fond of poetry. That's why when he spoke, he could elucidate on the exuberance of the Gitanjali by Tagore, on the brilliance of Shakespeare, and on the immaculate and unraveled poetry of Ghalib. When he went with a group of students to meet the Nobel laureate in Santiniketan, Rabindranath Tagore, he gave a small speech on behalf of the Students' Union. And Tagore said to him and blessed him and said, "My boy, I can write beautifully, but I cannot speak like you." These are words that keep coming back to me, and I wonder, where is my father? But he is with us because we celebrate his honesty, his compassion, his love, his kindness, and most of all, integrity. If you would want me to say in one word, how would I describe my father? A man of integrity. And today, I am so glad that 50 years later, I'm alive to speak to such an august gathering of men and women. And I'm so grateful that you've given me your time to listen to his story. I hope, as I conclude my talk, the angels will serenade around him and bless him with eternal peace. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Syeda Zakia. That's a really charming set of recollections there. Could I ask you, do you think his views changed, or do you think the world changed around him? And how do you think his views changed?
I don't think his views changed very much, because he believed in communal harmony and justice and for all, which is why he did not leave India. And also, if he had joined the Congress, he would have been very high posts in different offices. But because of his values and his principles, he did not want to change, and he did not want partition. The world changed, but my father remained unchanged. I think so.
So what do you think? Do you think it was what do you think made him, even after India had been partitioned, he didn't want to join Congress? He was clearly a very
He didn't want to join Congress, clearly because his allegiance to the Muslim community was far greater in his life than his allegiance to the values of the Congress. And he thought that if he had joined the Congress, then in many instances he would not be able to speak as freely. He would not be able to speak as freely as he did for the Muslims at different times, during different calamities, during riots, during massacres, which he did during his lifetime. So he wanted to be independent and have his own pedestal to speak for the community forever.
Do you think, because he was an advocate of a sort of united Bengal position, is that fair to say?
Yes.
I mean, do you think, I mean, how do you understand his thoughts about Bengal and his thoughts about being a representative of Muslims? Were they the same thing to him, or were they slightly different?
No. When he spoke of the Muslims in Bengal, in the whole of India, he also spoke of the minorities in India. And because the Muslims suffered at different times in different ways, you needed someone to flag that up. And he was able to do that because he had a pedestal, which was solely his own, and he didn't represent any other party.
A question from one person in the audience, from Mark Moody Stewart, just asking, what do you think the underlying reasons were for the government to seek to imprison your father? Why do you think the government of India was so worried about him?
Well, I'm the youngest. I've seen very little of my father, but from what I've heard and what I've gathered, is because he always stood for truth and he was honest, and because he didn't accept the many huge positions that was offered to him by different prime ministers during his tenure. And they wanted to shut him up so that he couldn't speak the truth, which is why he was imprisoned 5 times, but every time he was unconditionally released without any proof.
And what can you remember? I mean, this charge of sedition is always a very general word. Were there sort of specific things, or was it just used as a?
Yes, there were. He was accused of supporting Pakistan. He was often condemned as a Pakistani agent, and many things in this line which did not match his performance or his experience or the things that he did in his life, and which is why they could not prove what they were going after, and then he was released. And it is assumed that when he was in prison during his last tenure, that he was slow poisoned, because he came home very, very frail and very down mentally and physically. But we have no proof. It was assumed.
And during this period, sort of late 60s into the early 70s, obviously there was a crisis going on between what was then East and West Pakistan.
Yes.
Do you think he had a view on that? And was he? Do you think
Well,
he would have?
he was already diminished with the partition of Bengal, and he didn't want a further fragmentation of the two Pakistans, East and West. And I think during that period also he was arrested and during the emergency and kept in jail. But he did not, for some reason, he was a man of old values, so he didn't want further fragmentation. And although the cause for Bangladesh's freedom was just, he was opposed to it for his personal reasons. He was sad with the partition of India, and he didn't want any further divisions.
Right. Oh, that's interesting. I just think, is that your husband on the other line, by the way? We don't need him if he's thinking he needs to drop in. We can still see you fine, so that's
Okay,
great.
thank you.
Yeah. So I mean, I just wanted, so he would have advocated East and West Pakistan staying together.
He didn't advocate the staying of East and West Pakistan together, but he was a man of old values, perhaps. I'm not sure. I don't know much of him. So he was not very much in favor of the creation of Bangladesh, but he was not against it. And because he was a man who stood up for justice. And if the Bangladeshis were fighting a war for independence from Pakistan, there were valid reasons, and he appreciated it, but he didn't actively support them.
Right. And do you think there might have been a bit of him that would have wanted to somehow see that Bangladesh could have led to an old Bengal, idea of a state?
I don't think he would have thought that far. But he was very sad at the partition of India, and he had very close links with Gandhi and Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, and they all knew about his values. In fact, when Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru died, he gave a short speech of about 4 minutes, which mesmerized all foreign dignitaries. So he had close links with these people. They knew his values. He did not want Pakistan. But I don't think he thought as far as Bangladesh uniting with Bengal. I don't think so, not in my opinion.
Right. And so therefore, I mean, when he moved to the national stage and he became a member of the Lok Sabha, what were the things that he spoke about mainly at that when he was on a national stage? So.
Well, in the national stage, he spoke about the needs of the minorities, including the Muslims. He spoke about the safety of all citizens in India, including the Muslims, after the riots, and he spoke for a very strong, a very fair India with communal harmony.
I've got a question here from Michael Burton, asking specifically about your father's relations with the leaders of Bangladesh once it became independent. Did you have any
Well,
insight into
that's
that?
a lovely question, because Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, who is the father of the nation of Bangladesh, was a great admirer of my father. He
Mhm.
studied in Calcutta at a hostel, which was just two roads away from where we lived. He came often to our house as a student, and even when he became the leader and the father of the nation of the country, he had huge respect for my father. And once, when my father passed away, I had a brother living in Bangladesh who was in government service, and he needed a special permission to come to India to attend his father's funeral. Sheikh Mujibur Rahman instantly gave him uh, the order to travel to Calcutta with his regards for my family. And also, the other people in Bangladesh cabinet had very high regard for my father, and that was it. That's as far as I know.
And do you think that they shared ideas, or do you think there was a debate between them about, you said earlier, that he wasn't
Yes,
so.
they did share ideas. There were several Bangladeshi leaders who lived and studied in Calcutta, and they attended the rallies where my father spoke, and they
Mhm.
spoke highly of him. So they knew of his oratory, they knew of his values, they knew of his principles, and he was a very common face for them, and with high regard for him at all times.
And do you think, another question from Michael Burton here, do you think there are Muslim leaders in West Bengal today who carry on your father's cause and his legacy?
Not that I know of, not that I know of, but there are people. In 2000, I attended a UN conference in Calcutta, and I came in touch with Hashim Abdul Halim, who was the speaker in West Bengal. Obviously, he belonged to the Communist Party, but
Mhm.
he showed me great respect when I attended that conference, and he had high regard for my father's values and principles, although he was a huge supporter of communist principles. Since then, I have known a few people who have been in the Congress as Muslims, as members of parliament, and and also members of the Legislative Assembly. They I'm not quite sure how far they have the principles that my father shared, but they definitely had similar principle of justice to all, and safety for all, and communal harmony. But I don't think that many exist anymore.
Mm. I mean, West Bengal is well known. I mean, I guess probably after your father died, it was dominated obviously by the Communist Party for a long
Yes, and
time.
and and there's a very significant aspect I'd like to bring
Mm.
up is when the Communist Party were coming to power, my father supported them in different rallies because he believed in the principle of equality, which it encompasses the values of communism. So he was a great conduit in the elections to get them the Muslim votes. And Mr. Jyoti Basu was a regular visitor at our home and had very high respect and regard for my father.
Which is interesting there because he's obviously managing to have a lot of different ideas in his head at the same time, isn't he? Because you
Yes, because he was
say, I
not
mean, he was
common. He
obviously
was uncommon. Yes, I
would you call him
agree.
a devout Muslim? I mean, he prayed
Oh,
and
yes, he was a,
yes.
a devout Muslim, which is when I told you that he didn't want to take up the second case during his tenure as a lawyer, was because he couldn't bow his head and say, "My Lord."
Mm,
So this is example enough to show that he's a devout Muslim. The people in our area got some of them got up from bed hearing the sound of the Quran, which he recited at dawn,
mhm.
and and that's what I remember of him: reading the Quran, talking to the people in his community. And he was a very humble man, very unassuming. His needs were minimal. He was for people. He didn't want anything for himself. And you know, he did not even take the house he got in Delhi as member of parliament, because he believed that if he took us to Delhi, the family, we would lose our roots to
Hmm.
to his voters, to our village, to the community, to our surrounding. And he said, I would not know of their needs, and I would not be able to do the little that I do. So we never saw that house in Delhi. When he went for his sessions, he lived in a hostel for members of parliament, Western Court, and that was it. So there are many things
Oh,
which,
well.
if I were him, I would have taken that beautiful house in Delhi and lived there, but he didn't.
He was
And these
more
are little things that we have learned from him.
a
And
humble
we
man.
remember it every day, you know. And, you know, even during, this is out of context, but I'm just adding, even during our meals, he would talk of history and politics and religion. And we learned about Hitler and Mussolini and the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him, during our meals, you know. So he was a mixture of many qualities in one. And I wish he was there for me so I could learn more from him.
Mm,
But that
mm,
he's gone to a better place, and I hope he's in heaven.
I'm sure, I'm sure. But it's interesting, this idea that he was obviously a devout believer, but he was willing to work with the communists who espoused a secular
Yes, yes, that was a
policy.
controversy, and many
Mm,
Muslim pundits wrote against him in the Urdu papers and Bengali papers and said, why is he supporting the communists, because they're atheists? But he debated and said, I'm supporting them because they see everybody as equal, which is
mm,
also one of the tenets of Islam. That's why
yeah.
that was common.
And so I think early on in your talk, you mentioned that he was very much an advocate for a secular state. Did I understand that correctly? That he wanted a
He
state that
wanted a
wouldn't discriminate.
secular, just, and free country for all.
Mm, mm. Where religion was the choice of the individual, it was not something that was baked into the state, if you like.
No, he was very close to Jawaharlal Nehru, and in his many conversations with him, he always talked about communal harmony and peace and freedom for all in India. And they had very high regard for each other. Although he was imprisoned during his tenure once, but his relationship remained good with him. And then during Indira Gandhi's tenure, he was arrested several times.
Mm. And do you think that was because she was just so intolerant of dissent and criticism? Do you think that was what was behind that?
Yeah, perhaps that's true. Yes, yes. She wanted everyone to say yes to her. She didn't want people to speak up for justice. And she was a great administrator, but I think she was quite fond of control.
Yes, yeah. Because it does seem quite strange that I mean, would you have said he was friends with Bose? I mean, Bose today is remembered for having such completely different politics that
He
it's hard
was
to imagine them in the same room.
yes, yes. Bose admired him for his knowledge, for his honesty, and also for his integrity. And the very fact that my father wanted a free India from British colonial rule, and Bose believed in the same thing. That's why they admired each other.
Mm, mm. But obviously, their politics took them in very different paths
Yes,
that
yes,
came
later
on.
on.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
yes.
Strange to sort of think of them all sitting around having a friendly conversation, really, at
Yeah,
some
which
point
they
in their
did,
lives.
which they
Yes,
did. And
absolutely.
I visited his museum last time I was in Calcutta. It's beautiful.
Mm.
Their family home has now become a museum.
Of Bose's family museum.
Yes, Bose's
Yes.
family home in Calcutta. It is beautifully kept.
It's interesting. I visited his home in Yangon during the
Okay,
Japanese
okay. So
period.
lovely, lovely.
It's also
Okay.
been, yeah, well preserved.
Yes.
I mean, you mentioned, your father was the mayor of Calcutta during the time of the famine, the terrible famine. Did he ever talk about that period to you?
That was in 1943, and I was born in 55.
Hmm.
But he
Did he
did
ever have
talk.
any recollections about?
Yes, he did
Yeah.
talk of how horrendous it was, and how tragic the situation was, how people died without food, and how he was desperate to get some relief for them, and how he wrote to the British administrators and politicians. Yes, he did. He did talk to us about it. My mother talked to us about it. And I'd just like to mention my mother because she was our lighthouse in our choppy seas, actually. She was the woman behind all of us, beside my father, who was able to do what he did. And single handedly, she brought up 10 children. One of my sisters passed away when she was 2.5. So we owe a lot to our mother. And she was a very brave lady.
Can you talk some more? Because I mean, having 10, children is an extraordinary
Yes, I
achievement
can
in
talk. I
itself.
can go on talking as long as you wish.
Please do go on. We've got
She was a
time. Tell us
very
about your
great,
mother as
very
well.
beautiful, very gracious lady. She was the daughter of a landlord from Murshidabad. She was very brave, very honest, very generous.
Mhm,
The house where we lived, we were 10 of us, and then we had cousins living with us who have lost their parents. Her brothers, two of her brothers stayed with us, who studied in Calcutta. She taught us how to share everything.
mm.
that
Can I
was
ask what
that was her
you said she's
biggest
the
quality. She
Mhm,
shared everything. Whatever little we had was shared. We were not spoiled by anything. We were taught how to share even our beds, our food, our rooms, everything that we had. And
um,
sometimes people wondered how she was able to maintain such a huge household with so many helpers, so many members of the family and our extended family. But God was kind because of her generosity. There was no dearth of food. There was no dearth of love. No dearth uh, of interaction between cousins, of discussions, of a happy life, and and that's why my sisters and brothers have also learned to share what they have, each one in their own capacity. And some of the grandchildren have also learned that, because these are the values that have been passed on from generation to generation.
you mentioned she was the daughter of a landlord. Would you describe her as an educated woman in that sense?
No, she
No.
was educated as far as it goes. When she was in year 5, she got married,
Hmm.
and she had a child from at the age of 16.
Mm.
But she got educated through my father's interventions, because our environment was like that. So when we talked of literature, we talked of poetry, we talked of Tagore, we talked of Shakespeare, and she was present during the struggle for movement in 1947,
Hmm.
where she told me that she burnt foreign clothes because there was a revolution against the foreign items.
Hmm.
And yes, she was educated spiritually and morally through her environment, through the
Hmm.
people she met, through the politicians who came to our house. During the times when my father would be imprisoned, the first point of contact was my mother. Even
Right.
people like Jyoti Basu came to meet my mother and talk to her and give her solace and tell her if things will be fine.
Hmm.
She was a very, very brave lady, very, very brave lady. And she shared, this is the only word that comes out from me. She was generous, she shared, and her love was overflowing for everyone in the whole community. And she was fond of poetry, she was fond of literature, and she brought up her children in a very congenial, cultured way. When we would have little celebrations in our house on the birthday of Tagore, on the birthday of Nozrul, the poet, the rebellious poet. You may have heard of him, Nozrul Islam.
Right. Yeah.
Yes.
Hmm.
And we would have little poetry evenings. We would have I organized quizzes for my neighbors, quiz shows with 10 questions, and gave out little gifts to the people who won the who won the who answered most of the questions. So this was the atmosphere we grew up with. So it was not always just religion. It was not just prayer and alms and charity and religion. It was also looking after the community. It was also mixing with relatives. It was also helping others. It was also sharing things. These are the ethos we have in us still today. And we are proud of them.
just stay with your mother for one more question, if I may. I mean, was it? Do you think she had any part of his political ideas, or were there sort of two separate parts? You know, that he looked after the politics and she looked
No, she
after
was
the
hugely
home.
influenced by his political ideas. At one
Mm,
point, she was much younger to him, about 16, 17 years younger to him. So
mhm,
she, at the beginning, she was not so familiar, and she was slightly alarmed. But then when she got to know of the essence of his values, then she began to believe in his values. And at one point, but there were times when she wanted my father to take up big positions, become chief
mhm,
minister, become governor. And I'm not quite sure when, but just to please her, my father was once rethinking whether he should, at one point in his life, take a position to make her smile. But
mm,
then, this is extraordinary. She realized that he was in a dilemma, and she told him, I don't want you to sacrifice your values for the smile in my face. I am happy as I am. So that
mm.
was my mother. That's
Wow.
why I say she was a lighthouse in our choppy seas.
Yes. So she kind of allowed him to be the sort of the independent figure that he was,
Yes, she
and
wanted him to remain as
uncompromising.
he was, and
Hmm.
she celebrated his qualities and lived a happy life and was very content with what she had.
Mm, mm,
She never wanted to migrate to Pakistan. She was happy in India, bringing up her children, living in the same community as she did in pre uh, partition.
mm. And as children, how much were you aware? I mean, I guess you were aware that your father was being taken away a lot, but sort of, I mean, how did you know, cope
As
with
a
that?
child, when I was in school, I found it very strange because they came and they took him away, and we would go to see him in Calcutta Presidency Jail once a week. And I must have been in year 4 or 5, and I didn't understand why we went only once a week, and why were we allowed to sit only an hour with him,
Mm,
and why were we carrying his books from his library, because he gave us a list every time he went, and he wanted certain books to read in prison. And very often we were carrying loads of books to him, and it made me wonder, why is he wanting books to read here? Is he not
mhm,
going to come home soon? So I didn't quite understand as a child, but as I grew up, I understood the significance.
mhm. And
But
did
I
you
was
have any
never
sense?
sad because my mother told me that he's fine and he'll be
Mm,
back soon.
mhm. I mean, did you have any sense of what his conditions were like? I mean, was he sort of in jail with the thieves and the
No, he
vagabonds?
wasn't. He
Mm,
wasn't. He was in presidency jail, and they were given very nice quarters to live in with an
mhm,
attendant, and they were treated very well. And
mm,
sometimes we were allowed to send food to him. Of course, they were checked, and also when he came away from there, when he was released, the officials of the prison would say, "We hope we get a chance to serve you soon, sir."
So they recognized him as being a great figure, a great
Yes,
leader.
yes,
Yes,
yes.
yes.
And he
And
developed his own community, and he gave speeches there. He talked to people on different subjects. He read books, he wrote.
mm,
He was not for a second in desperation or, sad. And
mm,
so he was a political prisoner. So therefore, he was kept in extremely good condition and
mhm,
taken care of.
mm. And did you feel that he was part of a movement, or was he very much a kind of a man alone who just, for him, that telling the truth was the most important thing? Or did he want to build a
Uh,
movement,
I think
to
innately he was part of a movement,
mm,
but
mm,
apparently there were many people who were not willing to give up as much as he did in life by speaking voraciously, openly. So I think, yes, it was a movement. It was a quiet, silent movement where there weren't many speakers except him. So
mm,
they believed in what he did, but they were not vocal because they couldn't
right.
afford to be vocal. They had to lead a normal life. They had to eat and feed their families.
Mm,
But the ethos and the values were there in them. It was a silent movement,
mm.
and we could feel it.
But he was the one who was so determined to speak truth and suffer the consequences.
Yes, and he did it happily. And we were never desperate about his conditions, because he knew that what he was doing and what he was saying was for a right cause. So nothing can go wrong. And I'm glad he did that.
Maybe sort of towards, we're coming maybe towards the end of our hour, but how is he remembered now in his home in Calcutta, in Bengal generally? I mean, has he been sort of forgotten because politics has moved on in India, or are there
I can
people?
give you small examples of
Mm,
how he has been remembered. When I went for it, what was it called? I've forgotten now. It was a regional United Nation Association conference. That means in each part of India, there were little United Nations offices that
mhm,
worked on the values and ethos of the United Nations, and they had a conference in Calcutta. This was in 2001 when I went. When I said
mhm,
that the speaker, Hashim Abdul Halim, he came to see me. And he came to see me because he didn't know my father had a daughter as young as me. So he
mhm,
asked me, "Are you his granddaughter?" So I said, "No, I'm his daughter, and I'm his youngest daughter." And he came to see me, and he showed me so much respect. During the conference, every morning and every evening, he would find out if I'm there. And that
mhm,
was 40 years after his death.
mm,
When I went before COVID, I found a dent on my father's grave, which was overgrown with nettles and grass and what have you. I was very
mhm,
worried because I wanted the graves of my mother and father, they lie side by side, to be mended. But I couldn't because I didn't have the papers from the Calcutta Corporation for the graves,
mm,
which were with one of my brothers who has passed away. So I contacted a gentleman from Calcutta Corporation to tell him if you could help me. I was leaving 2 days after to London. When I came to London, they mended his grave and sent me a photograph and thanked me for telling him to do that. He said, "We owe him so much. This is nothing what we have done."
oh, what a nice story. So
And
the
another
memory
little
of
story
his.
was the professor who
Mm,
came, and he was looking for somebody, some child of Syed Badrudduja. When he heard I was there, he came and he gave me that biography he wrote of my father in Urdu.
mm,
And I had tears in my eyes because it was nearly 50 years later, 50
mm.
years after his death. So this is the kind of respect people still have in Calcutta
So
and
there are
West Bengal.
Yeah, so there are still some people that look to him and the views that he espoused back then.
Hugely, yes,
Yeah.
hugely in fact in the entire subcontinent,
Yes.
Pakistan and Bangladesh.
Mm. What do you think? Do you have any idea what he would think about Indian politics today? Do you think he would be shocked with how things are now?
Yeah, it would be beyond shock because
Mm,
it's in a super mess, and he would have thought so.
mm. And presumably he would have said so too. Do you think?
Yes, if he were given the chance, he would be as voracious and as open as he was when he was alive.
Mm, mm. And do you find, I mean, do people get in contact with you, in order to find out more about his life? Are you?
Yeah, there are still some very old associates of my father's friends' children who want to know more about him,
Mhm,
and they would like that Urdu book to be translated. Some would like to write on him. So there's
mm,
all kinds of people I meet from time to time, and I feel very pleased. But it's difficult to get everyone together and do what is possible, do the things that they want to do. But yes, there are people hugely interested in his achievements and in his life.
yes. Well, I hope that you'll be able to be a resource for them and to pass on so much of what you've told us and more to younger people and to researchers, and to preserve his memory and his achievements.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been a really, really fun and interesting and engaging discussion with you. And thank you for taking the time. And
Thank you all for giving me the time to talk about him. I'm so happy, and I end my talk with a prayer for all fathers who are in heaven. May God look after them. just as they looked after us when we were infants. This is a quotation from the Quran.
Thank you. And you and I have been talking offline about the possibility of the transcript of your talk being printed in the journal. So if we can make that happen, then that will be another way that we can sort of remember his life and put down a marker for future research, I hope.
Thank you so much. It's so kind of you. I'm so grateful to the RSAA to give me this opportunity to speak.
We're very pleased to do so. Thank you for joining us. And just before I go, I will mention we've got a couple more online events coming up. We have a talk on the contest for the Indian Ocean and the making of a new world order on the 3rd of December. And we have a talk on by Raffaello Pantucci, whose book Sinostan, China's Inadvertent Empire in Central Asia was published a while ago, but he'll be talking to us on the 11th of December. And actually, in the new year, we have David Chaffetz talking about his new book. That's on the 22nd of January the beginning of next year. All details of those are at our website, rsaa.org.uk. But for now, I'll just say thank you ever so much to Syeda Zakia Ahsan for talking to us so beautifully about her father's life, and to everybody in the audience for joining us. And I look forward to seeing you either online or in person at an RSA event soon. Thank you very much indeed.